Hey folks, this is Ben from Road to VR. We are here at, we could call it day 0 of GDC. We are at the Oculus game preview, and I have with me David Adams, who is the president of Gunfire. And David, I just stepped out of kind of playing the 20 minutes or so of Chronos, and this game to me feels like a step backwards to a time when games were adventures that people were going to go through. It feels very different to me than a lot of other games right now that are kind of about keeping the player hooked on some short-term thing. This seems like something deep. Was this an intentional thing for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, very early on we decided we didn't want to make a game that handheld the player. Like, one of the cool things about VR is that you just, in this world, you're enjoying it and you're looking around and doing stuff. And I think if you just push a player through the game, they're missing out on a lot of stuff. And we really wanted to encourage people to stop, look around, think, and enjoy themselves. And part of that was like, hey, we're not going to tell you exactly what to do. You have to figure it out. So absolutely.
Can you talk about some of the inspirations for this game?
Oh, man, there's a ton. I mean, there's a lot of cool puzzle mechanics. I love old school adventure games. I mean, like Secret of Monkey Island type stuff, or even Resident Evil. I know a lot of people don't think of that as a puzzle game, but it basically is. And there's a lot of that stuff in the game. And then I love RPGs, so from a depth of the character progression, the combat and sort of stuff, a lot of inspiration from a ton of different RPGs and stuff like that. And style-wise, we actually wanted something that felt kind of like a fairy tale. And I don't know if that picked up on that when you're playing it, but it has this sort of fairy tale-esque quality to it, and that's really what we wanted to capture in the look and feel of the game.
Yeah. Well, so currently we're seeing for the first time here an interesting mix where parts of the game are actually taking place where there are some contemporary elements that me as a person in this world understands, but my character who I'm controlling seems to be unfamiliar with. Can you give us a little bit of a hint at what's happening here and how you get to the fantasy sections that we had seen in some other gameplay previously?
So one thing we want to do is sort of anchor the game in the real world, because I feel like fantasy is, things are more fantastical when they're given in relation to something that's normal. If you know all the rules of normal society and physics and then you see magic, that's crazy. If you live in a world where magic's everywhere, magic's not crazy, it's mundane. So we really wanted to have that contrast, and I think from a player in the world's point of view, without getting into too much of the fiction of the story, it is on Earth, but society has regressed to the point where they are more medieval. Now, they don't have magic and all the other stuff, but from a technological point of view, they sew their own clothes, they make their own weapons, they forge their own weapons, so he's kind of going into the old world and seeing the remnants of our modern society, and then he goes from there into fantasy environments. So you get a lot of cool exploration and progression as the player.
And tell me how, I saw in there in just my brief 20 minutes a beautiful world, lots of beautiful spaces, but how important is the narrative and the story going to be to this game?
The story is not we don't have a lot of cutscenes. It's not something that's kind of pushed on you, but it's definitely there. There's NPCs, there's lore pieces like books and stuff like that, and you actually flip the pages in the book to read through them. And we wanted the player to pick up the story as they played without it being pushed on them. And again, that get back to, we didn't want a game that pushed you through the game. This is more about, we've built this world, we've built this story, and we've made the mechanisms for you to enjoy it and explore it, and it's up to you to do that at your own pace.
And so there is some sort of age mechanic where your character's getting older. Can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, as part of the sort of the mythos of the game and how he gets between all these different fantasy worlds, a consequence of that is when he dies in these fantasy worlds, now I don't know if this is a consequence because normally when you die, but in this game when he dies, he actually regenerates, but he's lost a year of his life, so he's a year older. And so how that comes into play is that when you start the game and you're young, it's very easy to advance in physical things like agility and strength and vitality. But as you get older, that becomes difficult, but you become more magical. And we always said, initially we said you start as Strider and you become Gandalf, or maybe Strider's not an example because he's also old, but you get the idea. You start as a warrior and you become a mage. And it's an interesting mechanic, and it's just interesting to see your character get old. And I was really intrigued by the idea that here's someone who's committing their entire life to this quest, not a year or 6 months, like the span of their entire life to complete this quest, and just thought that was kind of interesting.
Now, does that mean that as I'm going through the game, if I don't do well early on, I'm not going to get very strong, but maybe if I get better later, then I'll become very magical? Or is it a kind of a linear progression no matter how you do?
Your age, I mean, obviously your age is linear, but the interesting thing is that at certain ages you get a new trait, and you pick between multiple. So that's partially how you customize your character. But your traits make you better. When you're young, they make you stronger, and when you're old, they make you better at magic. So there's this interesting balancing mechanic where the more you die, let's say you're not good at the game and you die a lot, the game actually boosts you up a little bit because it's giving you more traits, right? But if you're really good and you don't die that often, you get less traits. So it ended up being a natural balance to the game, whereas, hey, yeah, you get older, you actually get a little boost from this mechanic.
And so, will the goal of the game for the player who wants to master this to beat it at 10 years old? Is it the character starts at 18?
Yeah.
Okay, so to beat the game as an 18-year-old, you're just that heroic
that would be the ultimate test. Yeah, if you could beat it without, and you get your first trait at 20. So if you want to avoid getting any traits, you could die once. You could become 19. But yeah, that would be. I would like to see someone do that. That'd be awesome.
Is it technically possible to complete the game without?
Possible. I mean, it's funny because the game is very caution oriented. Like the more cautious you are, the better you do. And first time I played through, we have a hardcore mode where it's really, really difficult. And I actually died less in hardcore than I played in normal mode because mentally I switched over to even more higher levels of caution. And through the course of doing that, I was like, you could totally beat this game and never die. Like you could be careful enough that you could do this.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of really beautiful spaces, but it was in this brief period pretty clear where I go. Is there going to be secrets, things to be found that are not necessarily required to progress through the game?
Yeah, there's definitely secrets. In fact, one of the first areas in the game you went to, that little island complex thing, there's an entire wing of that total thing that's completely optional. But it adds a lot to the lore, so it's cool if you unlock it. But yeah, we wanted you to have a general idea where you need to go. Now, the trick in the game is figuring out how to get there as far as solving puzzles and that sort of thing. And a decent amount of stuff that you could discover if you were observant enough and explored enough.
Yeah. I think that on paper, this game, if you came to someone and said, "Hey, we're going to make a third-person adventure game," would not be the first place people's minds would go for what would be great in virtual reality. But it seems to be working pretty darn well, and I'm excited to play more of it. How and when did you realize that this was a fit for VR?
Honestly, when we were working on Spirit Champion for the Gear VR, we were going to pitch this game to Oculus, and we tried a bunch of different camera angles, and this was just the one that worked the best. We tried some that involved movement, we tried some that involved teleportation, and it was just the one where the game played the best. So at the end of the day, we chose, not for the sake of gameplay, because we wanted the game to be fun. So.
Well, we appreciate your time here and looking forward to the game. It will be a launch title, correct?
Correct. Yep. First day, it'll be available.
Great. And pricing on that?
It's $49.99.
Awesome. Well, we are certainly looking forward to it. And this is an Oculus exclusive?
Yeah, it's an Oculus Studio title. So.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, David. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good day.